community stakeholder engagement has science. That's the only way science has for it to flow to the community. Understand this and to really and ask the stakeholders. And so scientists and as community engage us in a fashion that those two worlds can help each other to do better work. Help move that along and move that ball, I guess, but hopefully get it continually that we engage with and love and appreciate work that's being done in research. And it's precious and important to help their health, but also the place where it belongs in the hands of the community.
Objectives, and I won't go through them there, and really think that bringing together patients and other stakeholders, evolving community-engaged research, and make opportunities to influence and benefit their policies to support this to even more in this space. The structure of the conference different than others that you've attended several ways. One being the diversity of their representing different science community as well as patients and very challenging task of trying to we have plenary sessions that great thought leaders mattering insights and perspectives, and one tomorrow from NIH leader. We have learning labs. So these are sets of them. One this morning, thanks to those of you who are leading these how-to sessions. So individuals submitted, which included community members, and that's how these were closed out. Those will be this afternoon. Where the think tank for one of the highest rated the opportunity to provide info, to give their insights and share perspectives. And then we'll end today with a poster, and thanks to those of you who choose topics. And we have some as well as students, and so we always like to see their work. Committee for their time. We have a fantastic group together. Sometimes, and then after we hear from them, we're like, thank you, appreciate it. So at this time, I'll ask all of the members of the that we got last year, which was that you'd like to was donated from Meharry-Vanderbilt and Meharry-Vanderbilt. We support from the so they are paying for the food and beverages. Of course, we are here in this last year as far as the intimacy. Happy to be back here again. And then news from the National Center for Advancing Translational Health and Health Disparities. That travel scholarship we are provide some travel funds to get. We were a little bit nervous because we didn't get notice before the meeting, so we had a rush to get better. Mostly that people wouldn't get the information why, and within about 4 so then we had some we could get people here and for really rallying to get that done. The process, but we ended up doing a block that the community members wanted to. We chose individual. It didn't come equitable as we would have, but we did try to do it in to all of you who are here. A travel awardee, invite you to stand so that we can see who you are, greet you, and those of you who did as well as in our question and answers, you can get in front of any researcher. That's the we mean it. It's just the rule. That's the benefit. Charge to you is, we really want you to please meet new people. Look forward to your feedback. One of the other things we got feedback on is we invited Ed Nasia, who's the marks for us, and he's doing that too.
koutou ki ngā iwi e hakaronga mai ki ngā reo ki konei. I ngā iwi, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. It's a rare privilege, I think, that I have the opportunity to greet you from my home, which is located in the hills of Salt Lake City, and especially that you're able to see what influences my life in some ways. I share this home with my brother, who's an American Indian artist, and you might be able to see that I'm surrounded by some of our art. Our art is important to us because that's what helps us maintain balance in our lives. You know, and balancing our lives is a real, saying the word again, balancing act, right? Because we have to balance our work. We have full-time employment besides our art. We also have to balance our interests, our wants, and our needs. And I wanted to talk a little bit today about balance. I believe, and I could be wrong, that those of us who have a commitment to community-engaged research perhaps don't think about how balance is really central to what we do, right? Because one of the things that we have to do is balance the rigors of research with the real needs of communities. This balance, I believe, is really the spirit of community-engaged research. I think that as I've learned about community-engaged research, and especially by attending the conference last year, which, by the way, I was part of quite a large contingent from the University of Utah and Utah communities, I began to see how this sense, the spirit of balance, has very much been a part of our agenda. You know, Community of Faces of Utah, which is what we represent, started about 9 years ago with a grant from the Center for Clinical and Translational Sciences. It was actually a project on genetics. And from the get-go, I had a problem with the word genetics because that doesn't fit well with Native communities that I work with. And I should mention that both my brother and I work at the Urban Indian Center of Salt Lake. Doesn't fit well with them. It doesn't fit well also with my Māori tradition. See, I'm a member of the Ngāpuhi Iwi from the Taitokero district of Aotearoa, New Zealand. And the song that I greeted you with is actually our anthem. We're kind of hoping that sometime in the near future that the community engaged research group might come here and meet. Because then, even if just for a moment, they would become part of our community. Being part of the organizing committee for this conference, I'm well aware of some of the wonderful things that you're going to be a part of over this next day and a half. And I regret that I can't be with you. On the other hand, I'm on vacation in Hawaii. And it is still my pleasure to be able to greet you on behalf of the community groups that are here today and wish you all the best. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
So, welcome. I cannot sing and I will not translate, so thank you. So, again, we're so glad that Ed was able to record this. And I want to give a special thanks to the team at the University of Utah and Dr. Louisa Stark for her help in getting that done. Ed has said multiple times that we can come visit, and so now everybody has an open invitation. We just flashed his email so we can start scheduling. So we're going to go ahead and move forward with our first plenary session. So again, thanks, Charles. I'm going to invite my colleagues, Al and Sergio, to join me here. If you'd like to have a seat, or you might want to do one at a time since you can't see the podium. How about that? First, I want to acknowledge that there's a change in the program. As you just heard, I only said Sergio and Al, and that's because due to Hurricane Irma. Old Bean was unable to travel from Miami for today's session. I'm very much grateful to Sergio for accepting without hesitation our request to extend his brief remarks into a talk. And again, I'm excited to hear from both Sergio and Al. So are the slides queued already? Do I just, you'll see, I'll continue to look to the back for my team to tell me what to do, which is usual. No, you're first, Al. Is that okay? Okay. All right. So we have, who many of you know, Al Richmond, the Executive Director of Community Campus Partnerships for Health, and someone that has really been instrumental in helping to bridge the gap between perhaps some of the more traditional community-based participatory research approaches and thinking about how we can meaningfully engage communities to the same degree that we have in CBPR in some of our translational sciences. Al has warned me that he's pushing the envelope, which I said this is the right place to do it. We want to be inspired, and we are looking forward to hearing his thoughts on what we could and or should be doing in community engaged research. So thank you, Al.
Well, good morning, and I think we're still trying to find our voice, and I'm working on mine, trying to find it as well. So I want to say how much it is. It's just such an amazing pleasure for me to be here to join you for what now has become an annual meeting, and it really is an intimate space. We're very close, and it's really great to see so many of my friends from all over the country, and so. I will say that if I don't remember you, just remind me where we met. Sometimes as you travel across the country, you meet a lot of people, right? And so there's only one Al Richmond, right? And so thank God for that. And so we're all unique, actually. And so I may not recognize all of you and your names, but I hear all these amazing names and I'm thinking, oh, wow, yeah, that's right. I'm trying to put people with places and stuff like that. So it's really great to be here. I want you to join me, first of all, in acknowledging the hard work of Consuelo Wilkins and the planning committee. I feel that Consuelo is an amazing friend, colleague, confidant, someone who I think is really just a trailblazer in the space of community engagement, and feel so very fortunate to call her friend. And I also want to acknowledge the Meharry-Vanderbilt team. I think it would be remiss for me as someone who feels very connected to Meharry-Vanderbilt Alliance to not recognize also that in the midst of planning this meeting, that team experienced a tremendous loss of a former staff member who was killed recently, and that team has really stepped up to the plate. I want to acknowledge that. I want to also acknowledge Janine Skinner and the work and contribution that Janine made to the team. Again, I've been very fortunate to travel so many times to the campus, and it's a very intimate setting. And if you're in Nashville, I would encourage you to just stop by. It's a very welcoming environment, and to join in that spirit, that very collegial spirit. And so not only the present team, but other members, Janine had been a part of that team and had relocated to Charlotte and was a professor at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. And so I just want to acknowledge that, because the contributions that she made to that team are very, very important, and really in many ways was just on a way, a track, a trajectory forward to really accomplish significant things in North Carolina and beyond. So I want to acknowledge that this morning. This year's meeting and gathering here is so very special for many reasons, in part because we were very fortunate to be able to secure the funding to provide travel scholarships to many community leaders. And quite frankly, this is something that we've been working on for many years and really trying to push that forward. And so I'm excited that we have at least 20 individuals here who really represent the community. You know, I talk about the fact that I'm the C in Community Campus Partnerships and the C in Community Engagement. And so it's a pleasure to have other colleagues join me. I think I'll have an opportunity to have lunch with you today. And I would encourage you, if this is your first time being in a setting like this, to really speak up and speak out, because we really do need to hear your voice. Your voice is extremely important. And I would take Consuelo up on the offer that if you have a question or concern or comment, that you step to the mic and push everyone else aside and speak your voice, right? And so do that. This is a special setting, and I think it's a setting that will honor that. I want to start by talking a little bit about Community Campus Partnerships for Health. I never assume that everyone knows who we are. Okay, wrong way. So I want to start by giving you an overview of Community Campus Partnerships for Health. And sometimes I'll say the full name, and sometimes I'll just say CCPH. But our organization is grounded in the scholarship of service learning, community-based participatory research, and the role of partnerships. And originally, these were primarily individuals in allied health professions, including physicians, nurses, dentists, and others who desired to take their academic skills and really work in communities to improve the health of those communities. These were graduate, postgraduate, postdoctoral students who, along with our founding executive director, Serena Cipher, really felt the need to create this organization out of that spirit of advancing community engaged research, but also just the service aspect of that work. So 2017 is a special year for us. It's our 20th anniversary. We were founded in 1997, and we are celebrating our 20th anniversary as a leadership organization. And so I say to people that while we didn't invent partnerships, we've spent 20 years seeking to understand, more fully understand and promote partnerships as a platform for social justice and health equity. So in the months leading up to our 20th anniversary, we spent time as a board and staff in a period of reflection and visioning. So it was at our 14th international conference last year in New Orleans, and some of you were in attendance at that amazing meeting. As I described it, the best conference ever. It was, so yeah, you think so? Next to yours, Consuelo, certainly not to take anything away from your meeting. But it was an amazing meeting, the best conference in 2016, right? And so it was at that time that I really, as a part of that process, really worked with the board to catalyze and kind of describe who we are and what we do as an international organization. Wrong way. So out of that process of really kind of visioning and thinking about ourselves as an organization, these 5 pillars emerged for our organization: leading, convening, partnering, training, and disseminating. So in some ways, it really synthesizes or catalyzes who we are as an organization. We're leading for social justice, we're convening for change, we're partnering for collective impact, we're training to enhance learning and best practices, and we're disseminating for impact. So you'll note that all of these are action words. These are the foundational ways in which we carry out our mission as an organization to advance social justice and health equity. They shape our present work as well as chart a course for the future as an organization. Our core values and beliefs are listed here. And so I won't go through all of this in terms of a continuum, but I think I want to highlight a couple of things. And first of all, we view health very broadly. We believe that we should change the conditions and the environment in which people live, work, study, pray, and play. And it's that second pillar there that I'll spend some time talking about today in terms of dismantling structural inequality. We believe that the central role that the central role that communities play in their own well-being. We believe in the power of partnerships, and we are committed to social justice and strive to model equity and justice even in our own organization. And that last piece is really important. And that means that we have to walk the walk and not just talk it. And so I'll share more about that as well. All of the work of CCPH is carried out through partnerships, which is great for me. As a community leader, I have over 20 years of experience in working locally in Raleigh, North Carolina, and then in North Carolina and regionally, and then became involved in the CTSA. And everything I've done, it's really been about partnerships. One of the things I say to people is that if I've accomplished any degree of success or any measure of moving the needle forward, it's been because of partnerships. I strongly believe in the power of partnerships. The work of CCPH is fully vested in partnerships. Some are long-term partnerships with you as academic partners and community partners, and others are emerging. And each day, I recently was thinking about the fact I should put a sign on our website or notice on our website said wanted partners, right? So we're always interested in partnering with people and connecting with them. And I see many of our partners here today. For us, it's really about living out the principles of partnership, living out who we are as an organization. It is through this lens of partnerships that I want to share with you how I scan the world and how I see the world and this country. It's just how I see things. This slide is a word cloud, and we took our core principles, and what you see here is all these words, and really partnership stands out. More than anything else, we talk about partnerships. Again, the power of partnerships. So for me, as a leader, the images of torches and racially charged propaganda that occurred on or near the campus of the University of Virginia on August 12th and 13th hearken to images of Nazi Germany, the firebombing that occurred at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Alabama. These images also remind me of conversations that I had with my grandmother as a child, who talked about the night rides that occurred in her community in South Carolina as the members of the Ku Klux Klan rode through Black neighborhoods with torches and burning crosses. These images on the campus of UVA serve to highlight a deep divide in our nation as we struggle with our own history of racism and anti-Semitism. In no way does the U.S. have a monopoly on these issues, as they are global in impact, and unfortunately, they are ever present. While we have passed laws and legislation, the structural inequalities remain. Equally as disturbing is that many individuals hold on to ideas of white supremacy and a racial hierarchy in this country and around the world. The images of August 12th through the 13th were shocking, horrific, and deeply disturbing. The fact that they occurred in or close to a university campus should not be lost. I want to highlight two reasons why I think that's important. First of all, I believe that in this country at this time, there is a battle for the hearts and minds of young people around issues of white supremacy and a racial hierarchy. Secondly, I believe that we should understand that academic institutions are viewed as the purveyors of thought and intellectual pursuit, and that the mission of the University of Virginia was modified and adopted in 2014, and it reads that the University of Virginia is a public institution of higher learning, guided by a founding vision of discovery, innovation, and development of the full potential of talented students from all walks of life. Emphasis on all walks of life. Today, I'm joined by two of the CCPH board members, Kareem Watson and Jen Brown. And our board collectively stands today in outrage at the ideas of white supremacy and racial hierarchy. What are we doing about this? So it's one thing to be outraged. It's one thing to voice your concerns as an individual or collectively about these concerns. But what are we doing? And so I want to spend some time this morning talking about not just our collective outrage at what occurred or continues to occur in this nation, but I want to share with you about what CCPH is doing to really challenge the status quo and challenge these ideas. And I really offer the work that we're doing as a gift to you, to work in partnership with you to actually dismantle systems of structural inequality in this country. First of all, in 2016, as Kamara Jones assumed leadership of the American Public Health Association, CCPH joined with other public health leaders, academic leaders, and community-based organizations and faith-based organizations in joining with Dr. Jones in launching a presidential campaign against racism. And at the time, I'm sure that people thought, wow, Kamara, you mean you're going to dismantle this system in 1 year? I mean, you're the president for 1 year. But I think that it was an ambitious plan. I think it was important for her to take that on as a platform. And the reason why is because we in this country have a problem not with race, but we have a problem with racism. Not race, but racism. And the fact that Dr. Jones used her position and the platform of the American Public Health Association to make this not just an issue for her, but a public health issue. So she elevated this from being a personal issue of outrage and concern to really saying that this is an issue that racism impacts the health of people in this nation. And that's important. And so therefore we felt, and I felt, when Kamara came to me and said to me, Al, will you support this? I said, absolutely yes, because I believe it's important to do. I believe that it's important because, again, it elevates the issue of racism in this nation. So on this particular slide, you see that Kamara talks about racism as a system of structuring opportunity and assigning value based on the social interpretation of how one looks. What we call race, that unfairly disadvantages some individuals and communities, unfairly advantages other individuals and communities, and saps the strength of the whole society through the waste of human resources. And if you're not familiar with Kamara and her work, I would certainly encourage you to look at A Gardener's Tale as being kind of like, to me, it's the primer when we look at dismantling structural inequality and understanding racism in our nation. So what else are we doing as an organization? This summer, with the support of funding from the University of North Carolina-based Robert Wood Johnson-funded Clinical Scholars Program, CCPH created the Convening Structural Inequality, an on-the-ground view in Durham. This was an amazing gathering of over 50 leaders from across the country who came together, some from academic settings, community-based organizations, and faith-based organizations, who came together for 2 days of learning to deepen their understanding of structural inequality in this nation. Everything about that experience was intentional. The fact that we wanted to make sure that people understood structural inequality in a way that for some of them, they had never experienced it before like that. First of all, it was held on the campus of a historically Black college in North Carolina. And that was significant. For many people that live outside of the South, the Deep South, you have no familiarity with historically Black colleges and universities. And one of the things that's so interesting is that these colleges and universities were not established simply because Black people wanted to go to their own schools, but they were established because they had no other choice. And that's important in the current dialogue in this nation. It is not about school choice. It is not about school choice. It is about, at one time in this nation had a system that did not allow and permit Black people or other races of people to attend colleges and universities with white people. That's the truth. It's just that simple. And so out of necessity, Blacks and others established historically Black colleges and universities. And that's a truth that we need to advance. It's a truth that we need to speak out on and be clear on. So we held it at North Carolina Central University. We also spent much of our time on the campus of historic Staggville, which is a plantation in North Carolina. It's located in Durham. It's located in the city of Medicine, kind of the county of Medicine. Again, that shouldn't be lost on you as well. We intentionally went there because we wanted to expose people to what the genesis of structural inequality looks like. And so we took people to a plantation. And I can't imagine, I mean, you could not imagine just the emotion as you ride down the road and into this deep woods and you see this plantation. At one time, this plantation covered over 60,000 acres, a huge, massive land with thousands of enslaved people. And so we wanted people to understand that when left unchecked, this is what structural inequality looks like. These were real people living out their lives. These were not people that were working for pay. These were people that were enslaved. So one of the things that in doing my own work, and when I've tried to embrace this fully and understand it, when I talk about people that worked on a plantation, I don't refer to them as slaves, because to me that dehumanizes them. I now refer to them as enslaved people, because I believe that when we use different labels and all of that, that it actually minimizes and dehumanizes them as people. And so it was our intent to make sure that we understand who they are. And that's important for me as well. So in launching this intensive, we took a major step forward in doing more than simply talking about inequalities as an abstract concept. The design of the intensive was intentional and important. So I want to talk a little bit, just briefly, just look at this definition of defining structural racism. It's a system in which public policies, institutional practices, cultural representations, and other norms work in various, often reinforcing ways to perpetrate racial group inequity. And so for us, this is how we examine and look at structural racism. I want just take a minute here to also acknowledge the history of social activism in this country among college students. These are images from North Carolina of students sitting in at Woolworth's in Greensboro. And so I want us to think about the fact that as we go forward and move forward in community engagement, that the work that I'm talking about that we need to be involved in is not new. This is old work. This is old work. This is work that's fully grounded in, working in the civil rights movement. This is an image of PhDs, pre-health dreamers, individuals who are fighting for their right to remain here in the United States. This image is of students and communities working together at Standing Rock, standing together around social justice and health equities. I don't want us to shy away from the historic role and I believe responsibility that we have because of where we sit and balancing between research and community and understanding the real issues that are impacting communities. So as I wrap this up, I want to think about and want to share with you our principles of partnership. And in the 3 years I've been with CCPH, I've really been unpacking this whole work and this idea of principles of partnership. And I want to highlight one aspect of the principles of partnership, and that is transformative experiences. I love this more than anything else, because I believe that we have to be engaged in creating transformative experiences for the people that are engaged in our work, interpersonally, institutionally, and then as a community. If our work is not transforming communities, then what are we doing? We're guilty of really supporting structures and systems of inequity. And everything that people say about us then becomes true. So if we don't want that to be the case, we have to be engaged in creating transformative experiences. Those of you that are community leaders will be transformed by this experience. I guarantee you. I started out in North Carolina. I could not have envisioned or imagined that one day I would be leading CCPH. Could not have imagined that. And so for me, this whole idea of transformative experiences is important. I want you to leave this space and this place believing that you are on a trajectory towards leadership and that you are going to transform your community. And as academics and communities working together, we can transform our communities. We can make them better. We can leave them better off than where we found them. The work of CCPH, the structural inequality training that we offer this summer, will be offered next year. And I hope that you will join us on this journey towards really better understanding how communities and campuses can work together to dismantle structural inequalities that exist, not just around race, but in particular racism and other issues. Finally, I believe that your work is important. And so CCPH currently has a call for partnerships, to recognize partnerships, our 2017 RWJF Award for Health Equity. And so we present this award annually. And so the applications and nominations are due Monday. And I have hand copies with me. I have copies with me. So I want you to apply for this award. And particularly if you're doing work around dismantling structural inequalities. But for all of you, please consider applying for this and join us in our work towards dismantling structural inequality and really living out our mission to achieve social justice and health equity in this nation. Thank you.
Al, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. In here. For those of you who might be thinking, well, you know, this is fantastic, but I can't do what CCPH is doing. I challenge you to think about the different structures that you can help to dismantle. I keep hearing stories that might seem small about how people have overcome challenges of getting community members onto grants and getting those grants funded and increasing the percentage of funds that are going to communities and the equity there. So there are big challenges, but there are small things that you're doing on a regular basis that we can all do. And so I encourage you to think about it in that way. Very powerful, Al. Thank you. So our next speaker, Sergio Aguilar-Gaxiola, is really, obviously, as you see in his bio, internationally recognized for his work in mental health disorders among immigrants and Latinos, Hispanics in particular. But Sergio is well known and recognized by many of you as a longtime leader in this space, as former co-chair of our community engagement key function committee and still current chair of our collaboration engagement domain task force. Sergio continues to be really such an important voice in helping to keep community engagement in the minds of leaders across clinical and translational research. And thank you again, Sergio. Thank you.
Buenos días. Let me say it in another way. Good morning. Well, thank you so much, Consuelo, and want to thank, in addition to you and your leadership, the planning committee. What a wonderful planning committee, and it is truly my genuine pleasure to be here, and to have an opportunity to share some of the work that we have been doing, kind of building blocks through the years. But before I do that, I want to do two things. One is 50 applications in 4 hours. Wow. 48 hours. Wow. Nonetheless, community engagement is well and alive, and it is just fantastic for those of you who came to join this wonderful meeting through that mechanism. That's what a blessing. And this is like being in a family. This has been really a family for over a decade now, and so many familiar faces through the years that we have known each other, and looking forward to meet those that I haven't met. Really, as you said, Al, with your wonderful, powerful remarks, that we are here to engage, and you said that as well. Looking forward to that. I'm stepping in, as you see in the program, for Olvin Carrasquillo, who Consuelo said he was unable to travel here today. And I have been in touch with Olvin, and he really wished to be here, but some damage happens in his property, in his house, and it was kind of scary. But more importantly, he is doing patient care. And he's doing the right thing. So what I'm gonna do, taking advantage that my youngest son, have 4 kids, taught me to use the panoramic view here. So I'm gonna take a panoramic, if you allow me, and send it to, and on the other side, so I can, let's see which one is gonna come out. So I can send it to Olvin, and and also I can gain a little bit of capital with my son. So I can let him know that indeed, I have learned. So let me share with you some of the work that is being done in California, and I will focus specifically in something that we have been working for decades now, and that is the gap between those who are in need of services and those who are receiving services, or rather, those who are not receiving services. And some people call it the treatment gap. And so the gap is, these are sobering, estimates that between 50 to 90% of people with serious mental disorders have not received appropriate mental health care in the past year. And actually, this is worse with some populations, as I will share with you. In the US, just to give you a sense, the levels of unmet need, those who are not receiving care, and these are who have been diagnosed with one or more mental disorders and are in need of services. Look at these numbers. Hispanics, only 3 out of 10 are receiving care. African Americans is a little bit worse. Asian Americans even a little bit worse. But even with non-Hispanic ones, 6 out of 10 are not receiving care. And this, when you start to disaggregate the populations, there are still some lessons to learn here. I was blessed to do this study with several other colleagues, and we did it in the Central Valley in California with people of Mexican origin. And this is what we reported. Those who were in need of services and who utilized services, 1 out of 3 of the US born, people of Mexican origin, 1 out of 6 of the immigrants, and less than 1 in 10 of the migrant agricultural workers that we included in our sample, over 1,000 people that we were able to study. This was in the middle of the 90s, and things haven't changed, I can tell you. We do quite a bit of work throughout California, especially in the Central Valley, and we're doing work now in the Salinas Valley. These are the agricultural areas in California, and not much progress has been made, unfortunately. One thing that I want to emphasize is that I have, when we have in-depth interviews, people who, after being for a decade, with severe mental illness, like major depression, and who have not received services, and ask, what's happening to you? Why, in the course of 10 years, in spite of this condition, and that they have said, well, I haven't received services. And I remember a wonderful woman, but she said, not because I didn't try. I tried on several occasions, but I just wasn't able to receive services. One of the tragedies also is that when people get into the doors of service, they don't stay much. There are studies that show that up to 75% of Latinos who get into services don't return for a second time. And of course, the question is, what happened in the first time? What were the experiences that they had? And I can tell you that culture and language play a key role. But there are other things that happen. And so one of the questions is, what happens if people don't get services for, in this case, mental illness? But it is not only mental illness, because mental illness and substance abuse, mental disorders and substance abuse are intimately related to general health conditions. See, someone who suffers from diabetes have 5 times more, is more likely to also be depressed. And substance abuse is also very much involved. So, I have heard politicians actually, saying maybe people are going to outgrow, mental illness. That if you wait long enough, things are going to get better. Well, they don't. They don't. I'm here to share with you, these are some of the consequences. Like, they intensify over time. I don't know if you have it in your radar, but people with severe mental illness have a truncated life experience by 25 years. And there is some data that in the last 15 years or so, that life expectancy has been even worse. Also, this is, it really gets me when I see people who haven't received treatment, to see the suffering that individuals and their families are experiencing. And also, it thwarts the developmental trajectory and the potential that people have as they, continue on with their lives. It actually, determines as to whether people are going to marry or not, who they are going to marry, are they going to study, so many things that we take for granted are at stake when people who suffer from mental illness are not treated. And this is a big deal, because I don't know if you have it in your radar also, the magnitude and the relevance of mental illness. you know, the estimates here in the U.S. for 2 decades is that about 50% of the population is going to suffer from one or more mental illness, and that includes substance abuse as well. Which means if there are, 150 here, you know, in our lifetime, we are going to suffer from a condition. And being that, you know, we are in the profession that we have chosen, we are at even greater risk. And so this is very important to keep in mind. The other thing is that it leads to significant costs to individuals, their families, and communities. And there are things that we are unable to measure. You know, there are economic estimates that can be done, but there are imponderables that we still don't know how to measure. So one of the questions is why the treatment gap? Well, this is something that we have been studying. What are the barriers of access to care? And we can think about, you know, at the individual level, we know the stigma is one of the major obstacles to seeking care. You know, also at the community level, the lack of cultural and linguistically appropriate services, as we experience that almost every day in the work that I do in California, and also the systemic level, the lack of a sufficient and appropriate health workforce. Once again, one of the big issues is the lack of engagement of people who are in need of services in behavioral health care, even in primary care. So these are tremendous challenges. If I put it in the big picture, you know, these disparities that I already described to you, we really have to put it in the context of a growing demographic diversity. Certainly in California, this is, you cannot miss it. And this translates into a significant burden of diverse populations and diverse populations across all of these areas that you can see here, racially, ethnically, geographically, culturally, linguistically. And this translates into ill health, also premature death, and diminished productivity and social potential. And all of these are waste resources. And this constitutes truly a major U.S. public health problem. So let me give you a couple of examples of the kind of things that are being done in California, and that my hope is that it illustrates different ways in which we are approaching these disparities. One is at the state level, and this is kind of a building block, because years ago I was sharing some of this information in, you know, previous national community engagement conferences, and I'm happy to come and bring you up to speed as to where we are in that process. There is something remarkable that is happening in California, and I wish that this is replicated in other states as well. This is kind of a Robin Hood initiative. It's called the Mental Health Services Act. And this was a proposition that California voters, you know, passed into law, and it came into effect about 12 years ago. And it increases funding for mental health programs, especially to deal with disparities. And what it does is that it taxes roughly taxes 1% of those who make $1 million or more. You know, I just cannot help but to tell you that, by the way, when this happened, California had like 46,000 millionaires, which, you know, translated into good money. But one of those millionaires continues to be Tom Cruise, I just cannot forget that he made fun out of maternal depression, you know, and I said, yes. When that happened, just to give you a sense, this past year, the tax collected, you know, surpassed $2 billion. $2 billion. It constitutes roughly about 17% of the operating, you know, money for the counties. You know, so it's a big, it's a good change. So one thing that there are 5 different components. I'm not going to give you the details, but one of those components, in addition to community services and supports and prevention and early intervention and workforce education and training, one of them is called innovation. And these are the characteristics of the innovation. So one of the programs that I will describe to you is under prevention and early intervention, and another one is under innovation. And the program, in order to be innovative, it has to be unique and creative, has to be new, not just new to me. Promote recovery and resiliency, develop with communities, including underserved populations within communities, and lead to system transformation and new approaches. These have to be community initiated to a great extent. So one of them is called the California Reducing Disparities Project. This is, you know, there was an investment during phase 1. There are 2 phases of millions of dollars to focus on the disparities that 5 populations have been experiencing. And as you can see on your left-hand side, those are African Americans, Asian and Pacific Islanders, Latinos, LGBTQ, and Native Americans. And from there, we develop population reports and a strategic plan that is about to be released. And then that led to what is now the second phase. And the second phase started last year. And there are $60 million that had been invested in this effort coming from the Mental Health Services Act. And there are approximately 40 projects. You know, one of them is a statewide evaluation, but there are 5 technical assistance providers who are providing for the specific groups, population groups. Also, there are 35 what is called we call the implementation pilot projects. And guess what? Recognizing that it's very hard for these diverse populations to get access to care. So instead of going and funding specific based evidence practices, the state decided to invest on what is called community-defined evidence. And this is promising programs and practices that are being implemented by CBOs, you know, community-based organizations. And this money goes to identify those community-defined evidence and practices and to provide them resources for 5 years in order to raise the level of evidence. Because if that happens, then with these ongoing resources in the state, the counties are going to get some of those community-defined evidence and continue to fund them. You know, this is part of the plan that we have. So there are 2 phases, as I mentioned. There are 5 reports available, and at one point I chair with the community engagement group this report right here, because we the center that I direct, we focus on Latinos statewide. So this second phase is funding once again to identify promising practices and system change recommendations to address the disparities, and this is specifically in historically underserved populations. I already told you about the priority populations and mentioned to you that there are about 40 contractors, receiving funds for 5 years or 6 years on this. So this is incredible because the state, by the most part, they traditionally have not funded for more than 2 years or 3 years. So this is quite an investment. The second project that I want to bring to your attention is at the local level. After all, even when we speak at the national level or state level, actually things happen at the local level. So we are working with a county. This is Solano County, which is rural to some extent, and the county, came to see if we could help. This was community initiated. Actually, the communities in the county are the ones who demanded to have some progress, because after 3 years of working with some committees, not much progress was being done. And this is the first county to design a multi-phase innovation training and transformation project. And that combines two things: the cultural linguistically appropriate services, the class standards, with community engagement. The goals are, to improve access to and utilization of mental health services, increase workforce diversity. There are 3 phases that we are working on with the county. One is to, and I will very quickly describe to you those 3 phases. And then there is an evaluation that we are doing all throughout. This is very much community initiated but evaluation driven as well. So the first phase is that we are bringing together these 3 groups of stakeholders: the community leaders themselves, the community-based organizations, and the counties. And the second phase is to, bring them together and train them with a curriculum that we had been refining for over 10 years and evaluating as well. And they are going to be trained together along with representatives from various sectors, from social services, schools, churches, criminal justice, transportation, etc. And they are to be developing quality improvement projects. So what we are anticipating is that they are going to come up with specific action plans to be implemented in the 3rd phase. This is the 3rd phase. The quality improvement programs are anticipated that are going to be focused on the things that you see here, from culturally competent care as defined by them themselves, and all the way to community engagement. Just to have provide you with a little sense, we are using the quadruple aim in terms of how the county is going to streamline the services based on what you see here. The consumer experience, provider experience, health outcomes, and we have also a health economist and epidemiologist who are working with us to come up with cost effectiveness of that as well. But, and I'm going to finish soon. We are very much invested in healthcare, access to healthcare. And it is important, and I think that it's important that we continue to do that. But, is it the only thing that we ought to be doing? Well, no, because it's more than access to care. I want to bring to your attention what my colleague out of UC San Francisco, Schroeder, wrote in the New England Journal of Medicine, that healthcare only constitutes 10% of keeping the population healthy. and look at personal behaviors, 40%, and family history and genetics, 30%, and you see the environmental and social factors as well. And so healthcare is only a part of it, and we really need to head on get into the business of what is unavoidable. So we need to take care. We need care that addresses the social context. And why treat illness and send people back to live in the same conditions that they made them sick in the first place? And to pretend that just because they come for services, we see them for 15 minutes and at the most an hour, and that they are going to be back and everything is going to change. I love this quote by Tom Frieden. Addressing socioeconomic factors has the greatest potential to improve health. Achieving social and economic change might require fundamental societal transformation. Interventions that address social determinants of health have the greatest potential for public health benefit. Absolutely. It is unavoidable. And this is important to coming to terms with health inequities, unhealthy housing, environmental hazards, limited access to food, and exercise, unsafe neighborhoods, and all the other factors that you see here, including impact of chronic stress, play a key role on keeping the populations healthy, not only to make sure that they have access to care. So I would like to leave you with these 5 questions that a great colleague of mine, David Williams, shared with me. We co-presented in Madison last year, and these are questions about new directions that we ought to be thinking, in my opinion. How can we identify patients' non-medical health needs as part of their overall care? How can we connect patients to local services, resources that help people avoid getting sick in the first place or better manage illness, including mental health needs? How can we be a strong leader and champion to collaborate with other sectors to improve health where patients live, learn, work, and play? How can we connect community residents to jobs in the healthcare sector, one of the largest employers? Actually, there is evidence that the health sector is going to be, in some states, the most important employer in the next several years. So this is a good question. It's a fair question. And finally, how can we use community health workers to provide services or link patients to needed supports? So I'm concluding the remarks here. I don't know if there are going to be questions at times for questions. Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much, Sergio. Really love seeing the 5 populations and a state level approach to solving some of the challenges. So both Al and Sergio have given us a great start to our conference with some ideas and approaches to how to advance community engaged research. So who has the first question for them? All right. Yes. Yeah, will you step to microphone here? And if you need the microphone and can't get to it, hold your hand up, we'll bring it to you.
Good
and
morning.
Tell us who you are.
Hello? Can you hear me now?
Try again.
Hello?
Hey, I think it's adjusted. One more time. It's on. Thank you.
Hello. Good morning. My name is Tracy Quijada. I'm with the California Department of Public Health in California. Also, I'm also the co-chair of the San Diego County Promotores Coalition from San Diego.
Right.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you. My question is for Dr. Sergio Gagiola about the Mental Health Service Act. How did that come to be? How can we start working on that, on other initiatives?
Yes. Well, it passed, roughly with I think that 52 or 53% of the votes. But what is interesting is that the millionaires, the ones who are contributing to this fund, they continue to be strong supporters. Over 70%. What helped with this, going back to your question, is that there were incredible champions and visionaries that made this possible. The main architect behind this is the senator, the Speaker of the Senate, who is now the mayor of Sacramento, Darrell Steinberg, and he's the one who crusaded. Truly was a champion, continues to be a champion for mental health. But there are others as well, that jump into the bandwagon. And now, it is very solid.
So we need a champion to get started connecting to elected officials.
Right.
Other questions? Yes.
Good morning. My name is Regina Greer-Smith. I'm from California and Chicago. Very glad to be here. I first want to say hello, Dr. Sergio. It's great to see you again, and it's good to see the advancement of your work. And I wanted to make a comment on Al Richmond's speech this morning.
Richmond.
Okay.
No.
I want to say that that was an extremely powerful, impactful presentation. I think that you presented in front of the UN and the International Court of Justice. That is extremely impactful. It brought me back. I'm a child of the civil rights parents, and I think that is in my DNA. And to listen to the journey you sent us through is something that we all need to continuously revisit and be mindful, especially in the current situation and to where we came from. So, Al, I want to thank you very much for that, to bring it back home and to bring it into what we're our mission and ministry today here at this forum. Thank you very much.
Dr. Meshki.
Lloyd Mitchell from Duke and a few other places. It's really great to see this group, and I really want to thank Al and Sergio for their inspiring comments. But I want to add a few, and actually, as I sometimes am, be a little edgy. A lot of the work that some of us do is in Republican states, and it's with places that are dealing with their own conflict, controversies, and difficulty. And as Al pointed out powerfully, language matters. So I'd like to share as a discussion that's been going on with some of the states, especially the Republican governors, about how to have a useful dialogue to move forward in health for all. And it involves the use of changing the terms. And this will be carried out by the CDC and by the state health officers. They've agreed to do that. One is to use the term optimal health for all, because it engaged Republicans and Democrats, old and young, and something we can all agree on. Measuring that turns out to be a key issue in which there's not a lot of agreement, and a role for, I think, the CTSAs. The one is language about optimal health for all. The other is actually no longer talking about social determinants, and this is to Al's point, but structural determinants, because it's not just about social. It's about housing, it's about safety, it's about the environment at large. So using the term structural determinants is a decision the CDC has made to start using in their language. And they're particularly focusing on health disparities and measuring the differences within subgroups is something the CDC will do as assessing the impact of its work. And the last is something that Sergio said, and I'd like to say it another way and more strongly, and that is that increasingly we're seeing the action is at the state level. And one of the strengths I think this group has is that we represent most of the states, and that there's a real opportunity, I think, for us as we look at stakeholder engagement to think of the policymakers as one of our stakeholders. And in some places represented here, that actually is well underway. And the opportunity to engage around optimal health, the measurement and the finding of strategies that allow us to be precise and targeted with our use of limited resources is something I think Republicans, Democrats, old and young, can engage in productively, and I hope will be part of our mission as well.
Thanks, Lloyd. I don't know that I heard a specific question, but I'm going to add a question to it, Lloyd. In taking some chair privileges, I really do like the idea of shifting from social determinants to structural determinants, in part because I think sometimes when people hear the word social, they presume that it's also linked to behavior and choices that people make, and sort of takes away the responsibility of others to act in removing some structural inequalities. But as far as optimal health, I personally worry that by using optimal health for all, minority groups, no matter what your minority status or affiliation might be, get lost in with everyone else. So I don't know, Al, if you or Sergio want to respond specifically to what you think about the terminology you're moving, and certainly I recognize it's important to be able to have conversations in spaces where people have different ideas. But any thoughts on the terminology?
Yeah, so I think words are very important. So one of the things that we were intentional about is that as an organization, our work this summer and the work moving forward will focus on structural inequality, not EDI or equity, diversity, and inclusion. There are lots of people in the space of equity, diversity, and inclusion. I think that work is important, but really it's, to me, fundamental to this issue is that of structural inequalities. And that when you do not address the structural inequalities, be it systems or institutions, then you're really kind of like putting a Band-Aid on it. It's really, what I hear a lot of people saying basically is that I do not want to attend another kumbaya type experience where we make people feel good and all of that. So I think that for us, it's really understanding the root causes. How did we get here? And really having the courage to ask really, really tough questions. These are not easy questions. But I do think that, for example, across the country, we're seeing college students and faculty at universities asking questions about what is the history of our university? How did our university come to be? A lot of colleges are exploring who were the founders of this campus? Did they contribute money from their enslavement of people to this institution? What were the initial policies and practices that this university had? I was at Yale a while back, and one of the points I made at Yale was the fact that, until I really got on the campus and started reading some of the stuff, I really forgot that Yale was a school for men. It was not a school for women. So when you think about structural inequality, that university was not built for women. And some of you are saying many others, right? A whole lot of them, right? And so unless you understand that, when you think about integrating women's studies and women faculty and all of that into that university, you have to go back to the genesis of it. That's the thing I really keep pushing, is that you have to unpack this and say, how did we get here and why are we seeing these differences on our college campuses and in our communities?
So we only have time for a few more questions, and I got people at the microphone, if that's okay. So I'll go here, and then we'll try to get to you, Don.
Shanice Thompson from the University of Alabama at Birmingham, where I direct the Community Engagement for the Minority Health and Health Disparities Center. I enjoyed both presentations, but I wanted to ask Mr. Richmond, you talked a lot about partnerships and how important they are. And I went and looked at your third strategic bullet, your goals in terms of those partnerships. Can you talk a little bit more about that empowering, that level playing ground, and making sure those partnerships are fair and equitable? What do you have in place, or where you're headed in that direction? Because oftentimes I've been at the university over 25 years, and I will be retiring very soon. And it's increasingly, I see that there is a need to empower community partners, and just as much as the researcher needs to learn the language of the community needs to learn the language of the researcher. And if it doesn't happen, then when they come to the table together, they're both at a disadvantage. So with the CCPH, what are you doing to heavily focus on that area? Because I don't think that, unapologetically, I don't think that we're going to see change if we don't empower equally on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you. So, I mean, I love that first presentation around balance, right? I think that's amazing. And so in a smaller group this morning, we talked about issues around compensating community-based organizations and community leaders for their time and engagement in this work, right? And so it's not just saying to people, here's an invitation, come to this meeting, but it's also recognizing that people have needs, right? And so they're doing this work because they're committed to their community, but they certainly need to be compensated. So I think that what we have to do is look for spaces where there is perceptions or realities of inequity, and then really understand how we put resources to bear, bring resources to bear to address those inequities and creating a level playing field. I think that's what we do, and we do really well. So I think that within the community engagement course, there's a big push towards making sure that there are many grants that are given to community leaders, that communities share in the creation of manuscripts and other products and materials as well. So we have to look at where there's an inequity, and then how do we work in collaboration to address those inequities.
Don, if you can go quickly.
Thanks. Just an amazing opening. Thanks to both you, Al and Sergio, for your comments. There's so much I could say, Al, about your just courage in addressing this issue. And I just also want to just call out your emphasis on transformational experiences. So very important in our work. Sergio, a question for you. You raised this concept of community evidence.
Right.
And I'd like to hear more about that. That sounds really interesting.
Yes, this concept originated in work that SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration, did, 10 years ago. They created a national collaborative that specifically on community-defined evidence. And there is a definition that they came up with, and that basically is related to, when community members who don't access the public health services because of whatever reason, distress, for example, that they go to where they feel trust. And several community members coincide that they trust that there are certain programs and practices that are being helpful to them. But, the CBOs, these are basically rooted in CBOs who are located where people live. The people look like the people that they are serving. And in the case of, share the same culture, sometimes the same language. So it is almost by consensus when you start asking various people, when you are facing, for example, these problems or these challenges, what do you do? Where do you go? Okay? And when several of them say, oh, I go to el programa bienvenido or whatever, then you have something going. And this investment, the 60 million, is to really focus on that, to see if there's something there that goes beyond the public health services that people trust and that are needing more of an evaluation, to raise the level of evidence as we understand it.
Thank you. Leslie?
As brief as I can. I am Crystal Evans, and I am the Director of Community Engagement and Research Partnerships Formation at the Johns Hopkins Institute for Clinical and Translational Research. And one of the projects that we do is managing a program to honor and educate young people about Henrietta Lacks and her legacy, and to promote their involvement in STEM. And through this year, we really dedicated, myself and several of our community partners who are out in the audience today, educators, an effort to create a more structured and real curriculum around this program. And we have encountered some challenges and some pushback within our own institution as we try to get the message and some of the information that Mr. Richmond addressed to the younger people who are really grappling with some of these ideas for the first time. And so my question is really, how do you start having those frank conversations, even within your institution, with individuals who are often in very senior levels? There's a need to continue and formalize and make these educational programs about community engagement of a greater benefit to the people that we serve. Like, how do you even start that without offending people?
You know, so as I was listening to Sergio, and you had that amazing slide about the diversity in California, I think about the diversity all over this country. And so my mind, tried to connect what you were saying, Sergio, with what I was talking about. And I feel like if we don't get this right around racism in this country, that we're really in trouble. We're in trouble because we are a growing, diverse nation. We simply have to recognize that. We see states where minority birth rates are higher, cities where that's occurring in the Midwest, Nebraska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Utah, right, all across this country. We simply have to get this right. But we have to wrestle with, and it's not easy, our own history, our academic histories. I mean, we think about Henrietta Lacks and the legacy of that at Johns Hopkins of all places, right? So I think that, how ironic, right, is that. So I think that one of the things that, for example, PCORI, I see friends here from PCORI, is that at one point, I think last year, when they did a trustworthiness meeting, they had her grandson or one of her family members actually present to talk about the family's, reaction to this and the legacy as a family around this. So I think that we have to wrestle with these issues. They're not easy, right? But communities and campuses together through partnerships have to struggle through these issues. If not, really, we just become kind of community. We have campuses that are just totally isolated from their communities. And really, that's not going to be good when you think about East Baltimore, right? And when you think about the demographics of East Baltimore, right? And the changing gentrification in downtown Baltimore, but also occurring in other cities. So I think this idea of transformation is really looking at how can we work in partnership together to create transformative experiences. One of the things about college campuses is that they have so many resources, right? And so we've done a great job around service learning, but how do we bring those same resources, students, college facilities, and all of those things to bear, opening up the doors of college campuses so that people that live in those surrounding communities feel welcome to just walk on that community, to be on that community campus and to take advantage of the resources that are there. I think we have to just drill deeper and think in a different way. And I think that the answers really rest in the community. I think the communities could tell us more about what they need and the partnerships that they want from the communities, but we have to have a listening ear and be sensitive to that.
Okay, so Ms. Chen, Ms. Carter, you guys took down those notes, right? Yeah. And when Mr. Max comes later on, we're going to have a little powwow with Mr. Richmond. We're going to make this happen. Thank you.
Well, we have to, I would just say, Consuelo, that colleges and universities have to recognize that they are residents in a community, right? Oftentimes, they're the largest employer, right? So they're residents in the community. And so I want to change this paradigm where we have people just kind of like driving in from the suburbs to a central city campus and then driving back out. And then there are riots, and then there's unrest in our communities, and we're like, how did that happen? Where did that come from, right? We're just totally anemic to what's occurring around us. And we have to do more than just have one person on the campus, oftentimes a minority, who leads community relations. That's not the answer.
So I hate to have to end the discussion, so don't throw things at me. But I want to make sure we get through the rest of the fantastic agenda we have. We do have a short break, so if you still have questions for Al or Sergio, please come up to them afterwards. But join me again in thanking them for the very exciting start. So we are a little behind schedule. We'll try and catch up. Sorry, we'll take it from your lunch. The next, we have about a 15-minute break, so I want to make sure we do have a full 15 minutes. So we'll start the learning labs at 10:40. So in your agenda, you will see the options for the learning labs. Some of them are in, some of them are here on the second floor. So if you're looking at page 6 on your agenda, LC 200 is here. If there's a number that begins with 200, it's on this floor. If it begins with 300, it's upstairs. And after the learning labs, we'll have lunch will be available outside. And I do want to make sure everybody gets back into this room by 1 o'clock because we do have one of our special sessions, and that's with Dr. Eliseo Perez-Estable, who is the director of the National Institute of Minority Health and Health Disparities, who's speaking at 1, and we want to make sure we have time to hear his remarks. So thank you.